Week 11 is here. Let's talk about a couple of starts and sits. My first start of the week is Brandon Aiyuk. Aiyuk is the WR20 in PPR this year, and this is despite missing a game and some change with a shoulder injury. For the year, he's averaged right around 15.5 fantasy points per game, tying him for 14th best among all wide receivers. For the year, he's averaged a solid 6.1 targets per game, and he's second amongst all wide receivers, averaging 17.8 yards per catch. Had it not been for Noah Brown exploding over these last 2 weeks, he would easily be number one. And this week, he gets the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who give up the second most passing yards per game with around 267. They also give up the fourth most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. With the 49ers coming off of a big win and Aiyuk having a great game himself, I expect them to come into this matchup with a lot of confidence and to attack the Bucs through the air. My next start of the week is Courtland Sutton. Sutton is the WR24 in PPR this year, and he scored 7 touchdowns already. He's actually on a 4-game touchdown streak, and I think this week against Minnesota, he has a great chance to get into the end zone again. The Vikings have allowed the second most receptions to wide receivers this year with 147, and the Broncos are coming into this game with a ton of confidence. They just beat the Packers, the Chiefs, and the Bills. Sutton is clearly Wilson's favorite target. He's averaged around 6.3 targets per game and has actually played well ahead of Jerry Jeudy, averaging around 12 more snaps per game. Unfortunately for Sutton, the Broncos just haven't passed the ball all that much. It's been 5 games since Russell Wilson has eclipsed 200 yards, and I don't see them changing the formula this week, especially since it's been working. Given that Sutton is basically touchdown reliant and has not eclipsed 100 yards or had a multi-score game, you have to peg him as a WR2 with minimal upside. But he is a strong WR2. At this point, he definitely warrants a start in all formats, and I would fire him up with some confidence. Moving over to sits, my first sit of the week is Adam Thielen. I gotta give Thielen his flowers. He's been the WR8 in PPR this year, which is something I did not expect. He's been somewhat of a PPR cheat code, but I think over the last few weeks, he's come back down to earth. We've seen his production steadily decrease over the last 3 weeks, and over the last 2, he has not been able to eclipse 50 yards. And things don't get any easier this week for Thielen. They go up against Dallas, who allow the second fewest passing yards per game with around 166, and they also have 14 takeaways. And with how bad the Carolina O-line has played, I think they're going to have a field day. Bryce Young is the 4th most sacked quarterback in the league with 29, and this is despite missing a game. Couple that with the fact that Dallas has been very stout against wide receivers, allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to the position, I think it's going to be tough sledding for Thielen. Ultimately, I think Thielen is more of a high-end WR3 in PPR format specifically, maybe a little bit more of a mid-tier WR3 in standard leagues, but I think the fact that DJ Chark, Jonathan Mingo, Terrace Marshall, and Laviska Shenault have all been in and out of the lineup have really allowed Thielen to have a consistent role in this offense. With Chark coming back and Marshall being involved again, and also Mingo seeing his role increase, I have to think that as the year goes on, Thielen is going to continue to regress. My last sit of the week is George Pickett. George Pickett is the WR32 on the year in PPR. And even though he has the highest snap share amongst all Pittsburgh wide receivers, it just is not equated to the production we expected for him this year. Now, a lot of that can be attributed to Kenny Pickett and the lack of running game in Pittsburgh, but even so, clearly Deontay Johnson has affected Pickens' workload. In the 4 games where Johnson was on IR, Pickens averaged a healthy 8.25 targets per game. In the 4 games since Johnson has been back, Pickens has averaged around 5.5 targets per game. Ironically enough, Johnson has averaged around 8.25 targets per game since coming back into the lineup, so they've kind of flip-flopped. Johnson has slid back into the WR1 role in Pittsburgh, and I think Pickens is going to be left to pick up the scraps. Considering Pickens has not been able to top 50 yards receiving in 3 straight weeks, along with the fact that Cleveland allows the fewest passing yards per game with around 151, means that you should probably consider leaving Pickens on your bench this week. Even though Pickens had his breakout game against Cleveland this year, catching 4 passes for 127 yards and a touchdown, he's just a little too volatile for my liking. At this point, he's a WR3 at best, and I would leave him on your bench if you can. Those are a couple of starts and sits heading into Week 11. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and let me know your thoughts heading into Week 11 in the comments below.